Good morning, everyone. Nice to see everybody out this morning. Looks like we've got a few holes in our auditorium. A lot of people have gone ill, maybe. Welcome to this beautiful Sunday morning. We're going to start off this morning with number 25. Number 25. Let us sing. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper, he amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. For still our ancient foe doth seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate. On earth is not his equal. Did we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. Were not the right one on our side, the man of God's own choosing. Dost ask who that may be? Christ Jesus, it is he. Lord Sabaoth is his name. From age to age the same. And he must win the battle. And though this world with evil filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God hath willed his truth to triumph through us. Let goods and kindred go, this mortal life also. The body they may kill, God's truth abideth still. His kingdom is forever. Our next song will be number 173. 173. After this song, we'll be led in prayer, and then we'll be excused to our various classes. 173. Let us sing. When upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings.
just pray to God for those that have the ability to be here this morning but don't have the desire. We pray to God that they might reflect on their lives, that they might turn to you before it's everlasting delay. Help us, to God, to live our lives with one eye always on eternity, on your God. This life is a short time, but we will spend eternity somewhere. Help us, to God, to strive to love our fellow man, to try to take as many people with us to heaven as we can possibly. We ask, Father God, you can continue to go with us throughout this service. Christ's blessing, we will pray. Amen.
Welcome to our adult class. We are in the book of Jude, if you'd like to be turning there. Welcome your participation. Jude is a short book, only one chapter, but there's a lot for us to glean in this chapter. Our text, we start at verse 9. We began discussing this last week, but we'll have a few further things to say about it, and then we'll go on from that point. Really, to understand verse 9, you need to go back to verse 8, because verse 8 sets the context of what Jude is discussing in verse 9, 10, and 11. Verse 8. Let me just start at verse 8, and I'm going to read through several verses here with you. Verse 8, the book of Jude. Likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, The Lord rebuke thee. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but what they know naturally, as brute beasts, in those things that corrupt themselves. Woe unto them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Kor. These are spots in your feast of charity, when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots. Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. And I'll just stop there at verse 13. I don't think we'll get that far. But verse 8 sets the context. He was talking about those, some in the congregation, and I think even if we went back further, how they had crept in unawares. They had slipped in the congregation, and these individuals, he says, were filthy dreamers. The word filthy is not in the original, but the idea is that they were defiling the flesh, they were despising dominion, they were speaking evil of dignities. There were individuals in the congregation that hated the authority of others, and it not only within the congregation, I think it was referred to civilly as well. They despise dominion, speak evil of dignities. The word dignity has to do with authority. That is a government. And once he describes these individuals, and I think in general they were people who didn't like authority. Somewhat reminds me of some in our own society who said, we need to defund police, get rid of the police or authority, things of that sense. So that was more or less the type of people he was describing here. They were people within the congregation. They were unhappy. They were speaking out against, no doubt, the eldership, but went beyond that. It seems like they were just against all authority. And he uses in verse 9, the text we're going to discuss, Michael, the archangel, as an example, saying that even he, in the highest position of an angel, would not accuse or not have a railing accusation against Satan. In other words, that it wasn't his role, his position as an archangel, as the highest angel, but instead saying, no, the Lord rebuked thee. And that was his example. And then he's going to go on and talk about some other things in verse 10 and 11, 12, and so on, about these individuals. So let's read verse 9 again, and then we'll discuss the parts we didn't get to. Yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. Okay, we know very little about Michael, the archangel. It's only stated, I think, twice in Scriptures. The other occasion is in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, and I'll read it. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Here, the archangel is identified as Michael. I think I mentioned to you last week as we just began to discuss about the verse that angels are a masculine in gender. It is angelos in the Greek, the os, as we would call it, the Omicron sigma ending os, always refers to the masculine gender. And angelos, angels, are always referred to as in the masculine gender. And here, this one has a name, Michael. The word archangel, the word arch, has reference to do the supreme or the highest of the angels. So Michael, the archangel, Michael, the highest of angels, he was saying, and this is Jude's illustration, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses. So there was a time, and this is all we know about it from this verse. To my knowledge, and if you know of something, help me, but to my knowledge, no other passage of Scripture deals with this occasion. But apparently, Michael the archangel, there was a confrontation between he and Satan, he and the devil, and they were contending, they were disputing about the body of Moses. Now, many people have theorized, why? What about the body of Moses? And I can only give you what many have discussed as probabilities, but I don't know the exact answer, and I'll tell you that up front. Some people believe that Satan wanted somehow to use the body of Moses in such a way that the Israelites would have worshipped it, like a shrine. In other words, they would have built a temple there or something like that, and they would have had all the Jews to lose sight of their focus as God was leading them now later through Joshua. Remember, Joshua took the place of Moses, and Joshua led the people across the Jordan River. Remember, Joshua took them into the conquest of the land of Canaan, starting off with Jericho and then Ai and other cities, if you recall. But some people believe that that's what it was about, that Satan in some way wanted to take his body and I guess take the focus away from doing God as humans are often do it, rather to worship something. And I don't know if that's the case or not. I really don't know. I don't know what else it would be. It had nothing to do with his spirit, because Satan does not control the spirit. But it simply says in the context that he contended, when contending with the devil, disputed about the body of Moses. Now, do any of you have any thoughts or comments on this? I don't know what the disputation, the argument was about, except to say it was about the body of Moses. Yeah. Sure. Ronnie?
It just shows that Satan don't know everything.
Okay. Yeah, and again, this is the only thing I know in the Scripture that tells us about this confrontation. And I don't know any more about it than that. Okay, but it is interesting. When you read that, you think, wonder what that was all about. But regardless, why Satan wanted this body, why the archangel was disputing or contending with him. But here's the most important part, and here's the why Jude uses this as an example. Okay, here you have this highest of the archangel, not just an angel, but the highest of angels, disputing with the devil. And here's what he says: "Durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, The Lord rebuke thee." Now, the context earlier, don't forget verse 8, because this is what it's all about. He said, these dreamers defile the flesh. I think that has to do with physically. One of the reasons he may have mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah prior to this. But then he says, despise dominion, speak evil of dignitaries. As I said, they were opposed to authority. And here in verse 9, even the angel, the highest of angels, when disputing with none other but Satan or the devil, does not bring a railing accusation against him. In other words, he would not use his position to suggest he had this authority to even, bring a railing accusation against the devil, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. In other words, this is not, you've seen that commercial about stay in your lane, okay? Someone was talking, I can't even think of the commercial now other than the punchline, but stay in your lane. In other words, this is not your role. And Jude was saying, listen, even an angel, this highest authority of angels, he wouldn't go beyond saying the Lord. He said, no, the Lord rebuke thee. And the idea was, how can someone within a congregation, or anyone for that matter, as we speak evil of dominion, speak evil of dignities, later, and we can jump ahead somewhat, but verse 10, let's go ahead and get to verse 10. I'm rambling, I'll show you what I meant to say. But these speak evil of those things which they know not. And I think we all can learn from this. We all can be careful. It is easy to speak evil of dignities, those of authority, because so much we don't know. What did the elders discuss Wednesday night? They had a meeting. I don't think we have an elder in. Yeah, we do have an elder. Dwight, shut up. I'm not asking you. What did they discuss? I don't know. It wasn't in there. What's their plans on X and Y and Z? I don't know. It wasn't in there. And I think that's the idea. So much we don't know. We may say, I wonder why they have done something with so-and-so or this and that or whatever. I don't know. Maybe they have talked to them. Maybe they have this. Maybe. And that's the idea here. But these speak evil of those things which they don't know.
Should say it was not everybody's business. Depending on the situation, if it's a family thing, or the congregation don't need to be involved,
Yes.
they deal with the family, the congregation does not know. Don't need it.
Right. And there's so many things, and I'm using this on a local basis in a congregational setting. The same, I think, would apply to so many other things. Maybe it's our mayor, maybe it has to do with something else. But the idea is stay in our lane, so to speak. And I don't know how to say that. That silly illustration that, I need to be careful lest I rail out and I speak accusations against those people who are in authority. If the eldership, I'm out of power.
I've seen it different times. I know everybody else has a copy of the book. You can almost read it on their face. Speak to the elders. They are heavily loaded in things and got stuff on the ground, but they're not at liberty
awesome responsibilities, and let them do their job, I guess is the idea. But there were individuals within the congregation, again back to the text of Jude, who were ungodly. I don't know how else to describe them. And they defiled the flesh, speaking of the way they lived, despised dominion, speak evil and dignities. And then, as I said, and I know I'm redundant here, I just want to drive the point home. He uses Michael as an archangel, the highest of angels, would not go beyond his level of authority. And I guess that's the best way of saying it. And instead of bringing forth a railing accusation against the devil, he said, no, the Lord rebuke thee. In other words, I'm not in this position to rebuke even the devil. He didn't feel he was of that position, but said, no, the Lord rebuke. The Lord will take care of it. The Lord will rebuke you. That's his point that he's making here in the context. All right, any thoughts about verse 9? I already mentioned verse 10, but then we'll go into it. Verse 10. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but what they know naturally as brute beasts in those things that corrupt themselves. Just a terrible description. I say a terrible description. The description is terrible. Let me rephrase that. Of these individuals, as they go about the evil, as they speak evil of those that are in power, and things which they don't know, but what they know naturally. Here was what they were going upon, their own as brute beasts, and those things, they corrupt themselves, their own vile nature, going all the way back to verse 8, as they defiled the flesh. In other words, they were just ungodly people, and they were living in that manner. And Jude is pointing this out to the congregation. I will say this, and then we'll go into verse 11, which is really interesting. Yeah, so often, it seems in congregations, when there are those kinds of people, that the congregation ignores them. Ignores them in the sense, here's what I mean, just leave them alone. And yet they continue to bring out all these problems and difficulties within the congregation. I don't know if that was the case here or not, but I do know that Jude speaks out very harsh words concerning this group of people, whomever it may have been, as they defiled the flesh, they were living immorally, despised dominion, speak evil of dignities, and so on. All right, any thoughts about verse 10? Once more, he continues this thought, and he uses three examples, as he did earlier when he talked about the false teachers, the false teachers, and when they went astray, how that God would punish them. If you remember, he talked about the Israelites, how they, after they sinned, how God dealt with them, how the angels that left their first estate, verse 6, and the Sodom and Gomorrah. So he uses those three examples. And now he's going to use three examples of people that when they left their estate and they were doing these evil things, he's going to use three examples to show us, listen, here's the end result. Verse 11, woe unto them, for they have gone the way of Cain, that's one, ran greedily after the error of Balaam, that's two, for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Kor. And there's a difference between the rendering here. I think we're going to find it's Korah, K-O-R-A-H in the Old Testament. Here, it's C-O-R-E, the way the English translates it. But that's who he's talking about. So he's using three different examples here. So let's look at these examples. And he's saying, in other words, they're acting just like these people acted, is the idea. Cain. Who's Cain? What do we know about Cain? All right, he slew his brother Abel. Why did he slay his brother Abel? Jealousy. Anger. And it's only a few verses. I think it would do us well to go back and read it. Genesis chapter 4, verse 5, beginning. I'll turn back there, or flip back there and read this. Verse 5, Genesis chapter 4. But unto Cain, unto his offering, he, speaking of God, had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? Why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. And Cain talked with Abel his brother. And it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which openeth her mouth, to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. And when thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. I'll stop there. But Cain killed his brother through jealousy. I mean, why didn't he? He brought an offering, Abel brought an offering, his brother. God accepted Abel's offering. He would not accept Cain's. Well, if I'm going to be angry, who should I be angry at?
Myself.
Yeah, really. But instead, he was angry with Abel. And I don't know what else that would be but jealousy. That Abel was accepted. No doubt Abel was praised of God because he obeyed. He brought forth the offering that God requested. But you look at his emotions. You look at his disposition or his characteristic. He was wroth. He was angry. He was upset. And I'm going to take it out on somebody. And he goes over here and through violence, he takes his brother's life. Well, this is the kind of character that Judah said these people are acting as if. In other words, they're like that. Angry, wroth, jealous. And he actually killed his own brother because of it. So that's the first example he mentions here about these people in the book of Jude. All right, then when we go back, any thoughts about Cain before we go further?
He represents a lot of the way people are thinking today. I'm mad because what I'm doing isn't working, but the rules were laid out in advance, so I'm going to take it out on everybody else instead of just doing what I'm supposed to do.
Instead of looking at myself. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You know, Solomon once said in the book of Ecclesiastes, I think it was, he said, "There is nothing new under the sun." Isn't that true when you stop and think about it? You say, what do you mean there's nothing new under the sun? Did Solomon ever see a car? No. You know, you wonder how these people would be amazed when they looked up and they saw the first airplane. Preparing for this tent meeting, it's really taken me back to do a lot of different things. But I was looking back through my files. One thing that I regret not doing, when I went to school, Thomas Eves, I'll tell you the whole story quickly. In the class of homiletics is a fancy word that simply means, call it the art of preaching or whatever. But a good teacher, he really was in that. But he demanded of us, one of the requirements in the class was to start a file system. And I looked for that book, and I asked Connie, she didn't know where it was at either. When I started preaching part-time and all those things kind of got pushed back, and so much of it's been lost. But it was a record, like I would have something on baptism, for instance. You know, it would be, I could look up in this big book, Baptism, and it said, okay, baptism in your file system is number 17. And then every time you'd record something, you know, it'd be 17 up here on your paper, and then number 1, 2, 3 through, I think, 20 or something like that. And if you needed some information about baptism, you go to your file cabinet, pull it out, and there it is. But it really is very efficient. And of course, something like baptism, you might end up with 20 different files on it. But regardless, I was going through some things. You know, okay, I forgot what I was going to say about it. But
You were talking about Solomon, his
Yeah. I was going through there, though, and looking, and so many things that I found, but one file had to do with poems that I kept. And there was a poem written by a lady long ago deceased. And she had grown up on Walnut Mountain, but one of the things she had mentioned in her poem about how times have changed, and she said, I remember when we saw our first airplane. Now, if you'll think back in the time, it wouldn't have been a jet, okay? No doubt it was a biplane that came over the mountain, and she said what a fuss it caused. And some were frightened because of the great noise it was making. Others thought that it was literally a bird that no one had seen before on the mountain. Really, a big bird that no one had seen before because it was flying, it was in the air, and it was moving. But when I think of Solomon saying there's no new thing under the sun, I'm not talking about an airplane or a car or who knows. In 50 years, we'll all be gone unless you're young. But how will people be traveling then if time is still here? I don't know. But what do you think Solomon meant when he said there's nothing new under the sun?
With the desires of the flesh.
The character of people, yes. Just as Ted said about, we can learn so much. Many people are like Cain, and that's true. The same sins that the people committed, the same problems people had to deal with, jealousy and anger, and so many other trivial things that people dealt with. You read through the book of Genesis and you see all their sins, how Joseph's brothers were so jealous of him, they hated him, they wanted to sell him, they wanted to kill him. Most of them did. Ended up selling him into slavery. Does that still happen today? I'm talking about the jealousy among siblings. Why, certainly. And of course, the different examples. David, he's up on his roof in the evening, he looks down and he sees Bathsheba and he lusts after her. Does that still happen today? He commits adultery with Bathsheba. David was married, she was married. Still happen today? And the results of people trying to cover up the sin, and it reminds me of politics, which I hate. And you see how people they commit something and then they try to, everything's covered up. I mean, is there any new thing under the sun? How pride leads us to do so many things, and the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, as Paul said, money, the love of money, not money, but the love of money, the root of all evil. And you see today how many crimes and how many deceptive practices, how many lies have been told because of money and greed and desire to have more. How people have mistreated other people because of a desire for more. The sins of pride and power and so on. Nothing new under the sun. Sure, new inventions. There may be things we haven't seen today. All of us, most all of us, I'll say in our audience, have seen the transition between a party line phone in your home to now a little cell phone that you carry in your pocket. Quite amazing when you think about it. You remember the first telephones you saw in a car? Bag phones? If you remember, I don't know, that's what they were called, but these big apparatus that you had in your car, and I've got a bag phone in my car. Well, again, it was something new and different, and technology, all that changes. But human nature, there's nothing new under the sun.
David, I think when it says Solomon had wisdom, I don't think he had the wisdom to build an atomic bomb or something.
No.
I think it was wisdom as how to live life wisely.
Yes, I agree. And you look, the book of Ecclesiastes is so valuable. Tony preached through it, months ago here, took different chapters. But you look in, I think it's chapter 2, when he sought to find happiness and contentment and fulfillment in life. And he got him men singers and women singers. In other words, he got performers, and he did this, and he sought this, and he sought that. Nothing brought him happiness, ultimately. Nothing brought him full contentment. And when he gets to the conclusion of the book, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. I've been in this position to have more money than any of us, have more power than any of us, and I've sought the meaning of life in so many ways, and I've come to this conclusion. Fear God, keep His commandments, whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it will be good or bad. But that was a conclusion that he had come to. But I agree with Dwight wholly. It's not to say that he built the atomic bomb or could have. No, I think it was the inside of life. We see his wisdom in whenever he was king. You remember the two women, which I just marvel at this insight. When two women came to him, and they were two, as I weren't they? Didn't the Bible describe them as harlots? Am I right about that? 1 Kings chapter 3. Anyway, two women came to him. Both had a child, apparently about the same age, a baby. One had, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was in the middle of the night, rolled over. Anyway, the child died. And both now were claiming the live child. And they bring it to Solomon. How does Solomon, all right, let's do a DNA test. Did they have that ability? They didn't have that ability. All right, calling your neighbors. Well, no, the neighbors don't know which baby belonged to which woman. Oh, how am I going to figure this out? What's he do? Yeah, bring me a sword. And he tells them, bring me a sword. I'll cut the baby in two. I'll give you one half, and I'll give you the other half. And, of course, what happens? Now, here's the wisdom. Here's the insight that I marvel at. What did Solomon know about motherhood?
Real mother would rather the baby live.
The real one.
Bring me the sword. And the real mother, no. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes when I think about, on the mother's side, knowing, no, I don't want my baby to kill. Give it to her. And Solomon then knew who the real mother was. But it was his insight into, not to bring him to that point, his insight into know something about motherhood, the instinctive nature of a mother. Never want her child injured. But the other one was already evil. She was jealous. She had these evil motives, and she didn't care. My baby's dead, yours are going to be dead too. That's kind of her attitude. Yeah, all right, let's do that. Go ahead and cut the baby in two. But the real mother, he knew, would not go for that. But that was his insight. That was his wisdom into not this situation, but motherhood. And we need to pray for that kind of wisdom. I hope you do. James chapter 1 tells us, our brethren, if any of you lack wisdom, who doesn't? All right? I'm not Solomon. There wasn't, Solomon was said that he'd have wisdom above all those in the earth. If you go back and read, I believe it's 1 Kings chapter 2 or 3. But I pray for wisdom often, and I hope you do. You should. Wisdom, to have an insight into how to apply the Scriptures, how to make the right descriptions. It is, for the most part, easy to understand Scripture. And I know there's difficult things that I still wrestle with, that I don't understand fully, and I freely admit it and confess it. But the things that I know, how to make the right application to. We need wisdom. How to apply that. And you think about wisdom, think about preaching. You've got this perfect text before you, God's will. How do you communicate it to the people? How do you help them to see and to know and to understand? And I pray often about that. Have about this meeting. Use me. Help me reach. And I'm hoping that there'll be people from the community there. I understand there typically is. I guess a tent meeting is kind of a novel thing when, let's go to the tent meeting. But regardless, we need to pray for wisdom. But here were people in the book of Jude. I've chased rabbits here. When he says in Jude verse 11, he said, they've gone the way of Cain. We've seen how Cain have acted. And much like the two women who were arguing about the baby that we read earlier, that we talked about just a moment ago. And said then this, the second one, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward. It's been a long time since I've preached about Balaam. And I had to go back and study all those things again myself. Does anyone remember anything about Balaam? Yeah, there you go. He had a conversation, one of the few, as far as I know, the only. I don't know. You may have known someone else. I don't. He had a conversation with his donkey. All right, let me tell you. We've got 5 minutes. I can't read all these passages in 5 minutes because it actually goes through a couple chapters here. Let me tell you the gist of it, and we can go next week. We'll take time to read some of this. Balaam would have been considered a prophet of Israel. Moab, again, this is a time frame now in the book of Numbers. Moab was a neighboring enemy. The king of Moab was Balak. Balak sent for Balaam, the prophet of Israel. If you want to call him a prophet, he would have been a prophet for hire. But I want you to curse Israel for me. You see, here I am, Moab, and the Israelites, they've already overcome one nation, and I'm a little afraid of them. There are a lot of people there. And he said, I'm going to get Balaam, their prophet. I want Balaam to curse the Israelites. Okay? I'll pay you to curse the Israelites. To show you what kind of character Balaam is, he says, well, now I got to ask God first about this. Okay? And what does God say? No, you're not going to curse Israel. Well, Balak, the messengers come back to Balak, tell the king of Moab. Well, he says, no, he can't do it. Send him more. In other words, you got to throw all these things up here, okay? All these rewards. And said, you go back and tell him again. Well, he goes back a second time, and he talks to Balaam. And Balaam says again, let me talk to God first. And God says, all right, and I'm paraphrasing obviously this, but he says, all right, you go. But you only speak what I tell you to. Okay? And Balaam says, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And Balaam's idea, his motive, how many gospel preachers today would, if someone come to, let's say it's some, I don't know, the alphabet group, okay? LGBTQ, all this other group we hear all about. Maybe their leaders come, or maybe it's Black Lives Matter, and I'm not trying to get us into these. I'm simply saying it's some group that comes to a gospel preacher and said, I want you to come, and I want you to say that all this is okay, or whatever the case might be. And, let me think, I've got to see if God has changed his mind on Romans chapter 1 or not. Well, you'd say it's foolish, but I'm going to give you a lot of money. Well, let me go. He wanted to go for reward is what I'm saying. So he goes, and on his way, he comes to this certain point, and his donkey just is between a wall, okay, like two walls, like a gate, and this donkey just stops that he's riding. What's wrong with you? So he begins to smite the donkey, and the donkey actually, he goes up against the wall and crushes Balaam's foot or his leg, and he's hitting this donkey, he's beating this animal, and the donkey turns around and speaks to him. And the donkey said, in other words, you've been my master, paraphrasing this, you've been my master all these years. Have I ever, done anything against your wishes? I've never crushed your foot against this wall or whatever. And Balaam, which is humorous to me, is talking back to it, and they're having a conversation. I think if a donkey turned around and talked to me, I'd be a little bit, I don't know that I could talk. But they're having this conversation. And Balaam says, if I had a sword, I'd kill you right there. And they're discussing this between he and, the Bible calls it his ass, which simply means his donkey. And then God opens the eyes of Balaam, and he sees this angel standing in this narrow path with a sword drawn. In essence, what God tells him, if that donkey hadn't stopped, you'd be a dead man right now. So you need to bless this donkey instead of, cursing and rebuking and kicking it and so on. And of course, he went on to say, all right. And Balaam said, maybe I need to go home. Maybe I shouldn't go. And the angel, to reinforce, no, you go, but you speak only what God said. So Balaam goes to Balak, and instead of cursing the Israelites, Balaam blesses the Israelites, because that's what God told him to do. And Balak is mad. I paid you to curse Israel, and you blessed them. Well, this happens more than once, okay? But in the end, we see that God actually kills Balaam. Why? Balaam, and here's the idea, Balaam was of such a nature that he wanted to be paid, but he couldn't. He couldn't go against God's will. You know, the classes are coming up. I'm going to be like some of these not soap operas, some of these shows that leaves you hanging. I'm going to tell you why God killed Balaam in the end. Something Balaam did. And if you have time, read Numbers chapter 22 all the way through Numbers chapter, 31? Yeah. All the way to Numbers chapter 31, and you can get the answers. But we'll, Lord willing, I won't be here next Sunday. Do what? Yes, Ronnie spilled the beans. I'll go ahead and tell you real quick. Since he couldn't curse Israel, he told the king of Balak, here's the way you get God to turn against his people. Cause them to commit fornication. Have them marry our daughters. Their sons marry our daughters, and their daughters marry our sons. And God will be angry with them. They'll begin to embrace our gods, and sure enough, it happened. And God caused a plague upon the Israelites. And when they came to a battle, Balaam, you're a dead man. All right. Ronnie, good Bible student there. And we'll talk about Korah next week as well, or when I come back.